Well, good evening, everyone. We are so grateful you could join us tonight for this very special soul session with two of my esteemed mentors, Reverend Dr. Catherine Thomas and Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings. Thank you so much for being here. And it is my pleasure to introduce them both to you. Dr. Thomas, Reverend Dr. Catherine Thomas, succeeded founder Dr. Ruth Mosley as CEO of the Unity Urban Ministerial School, which opened in 1980, and now with over 200 graduates whose purpose was and is to bring racial and ethnic equity into New Thought ministerial service. And just a quick aside, I was married here in Houston, and there was a Reverend Ron who married us at the Unity Truth Center of Truth here in Houston. And he was a graduate of the Unity Urban Ministerial Program. He has since moved on. So Dr. Thomas was one of his teachers, and she is an instructor also at the Transformation Talk College of Spiritual Studies and a professor at Holos University, and is the author of The Next Testament, Our Story of Regeneration. And she is one who has regenerated herself many, many times over. And now to Reverend Dr. Jesse Jennings, at whose center I serve as a licensed religious science practitioner. Dr. Jennings is a founder, we like to call him Jesse, a founding minister of Creative Life Spiritual Center and a contributing editor of the Guide for Spiritual Living, Science of Mind magazine, where his monthly column has run for over 30 years. People all over the world know of Reverend Jennings. He compiled and edited the book, The Essential Ernest Holmes, and a collection of the columns was published in book form last fall under the title, More Than We Seem. This event is presented by Creative Life's Be the Change Initiative. And now I'm getting out of the way. I am getting ready to immerse myself in this wonderful experience from these two esteemed leaders of the New Thought Ministry.
Thank you so much, PJ. Dr. Catherine, it's a delight to be with you tonight. And as I said, I really enjoyed our phone talk over the weekend to prepare for this. Before we get started, I have a couple of things I want to say to the camera and to all who may be watching tonight of a logistical nature, what we're doing here. First of all, this is part one of two. The second half of this conversation will occur 2 weeks from tonight, which would be what, the 18th of May, also at 7 o'clock Central, on the same Facebook page as this is occurring. The other thing I wanted to mention was that this is the latest in a long series of soul sessions that we've had on camera. Some of them were filmed live on our stage. And then, of course, during the pandemic, we went to Zoom only. And I encourage anyone watching to go to our YouTube channel, Creative Life Spiritual Center YouTube channel, to the playlist and click on Soul Sessions. And you'll see some of the other amazing conversations that we've had with leaders in equity and justice over the past, basically about the past 6 years. So, Dr. Catherine, your name came to us through PJ, and then PJ and Sandy had a wonderful conversation with you. And I'd like to ask you about the background of the Unity Urban Ministerial School, how that came to be, and your role with that, succeeding the founder. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Jesse, I would be delighted to talk about the Unity Urban Ministerial School. I just want to thank PJ for reaching out to me. She was one of my students at Unity Urban Ministerial School back when I was the executive director there, and I'm pretty sure I had PJ in class at that time. That was maybe some half dozen years ago. The Unity Urban Ministerial School is in Detroit, although Unity Village is in Missouri, right next to Kansas City, Missouri, and Lee Summit, Missouri. Unity Village was founded by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore back in the century before the last, really. It began, we're talking the 1800s in Kansas City, and then moved out into the suburbs, into acreage. There was at one time 1,400 acres in Unity Village. There still are. Unity Village was founded as a pillar to New Thought. This is the teaching of Jesus Christ, not the teaching about Jesus Christ that we often hear in the Christian tradition, but this is the Christian New Thought tradition. Unity gave rise to wonderful platforms of New Thought and spread to California, all around the planet. In 1920, Unity Village began to be developed. There were many people of many backgrounds that became a part of Unity, including African Americans. One of the first African Americans, not the first, but one of the first African Americans in the 1950s to attend, to learn the teachings was Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman. Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman attended classes at Unity Village. However, because of the traditions, not only in Missouri, but throughout the United States at that time, she experienced a great deal of racism. She was not allowed to live on the grounds. She was not allowed to swim in the swimming pool. She was allowed to attend classes. One night a storm came up and she was studying with one of her colleagues, one of her student, and one of the other students. And the student said to her, "Why is it you have to drive back into Kansas City where you live in a house with some Black people? Why can't you just spend the night here with me?" And Johnny Coleman said, "Oh, you and I both would have a lot of problems with Charles Fillmore and Unity." And so she drove out into the storm. The students challenged this the next day. And the challenges were only the first of what Johnny Coleman met at Unity. Even though she was ordained a Unity minister, even though she became one of the presidents of the board of the Association of Unity Churches, the first African American to become that. She met with many racist challenges in Unity. And so she left Unity to start her own Universal Foundation. And she created in Chicago with the Universal Foundation a church larger than any of the Unity churches, a church larger than any of the Unity churches to this day. Even though Johnny Coleman has made her transition, I was blessed to meet her, to spend time at her feet when she came back to Unity Village, when we had unity, when we had inclusivity with Unity and Johnny Coleman and her organization and her ministers on several occasions that I was there. The last time I saw her, she came to a wedding at Unity Village, and that was when she was frail, a few years before she made her transition. Following Johnny Coleman in the 1960s was Reverend Dr. Ruth Mosley, my mentor. Reverend Dr. Ruth Mosley studied, as Johnny Coleman had, at Unity Village, certainly lived on grounds, and also rose to heights in the Unity movement to become the second president of Unity Association of Ministries, churches. Ruth Mosley, unlike Johnny Coleman, never left Unity. However, she did make some big strides. And one was because many African Americans were being denied admission to the Ministerial School at Unity Village. Ruth Mosley decided to begin her own ministerial school. And somehow she slid that through. There was several Caucasian ministers who helped her slide that through. It was incredible that she was able to slide that through. But she began in Detroit, where she lived, and had been the first woman, any woman, to found a church and build it from the ground in the city of Detroit. She now founded Unity Urban Ministerial School, which trained Unity ministers, as did the Ministerial School at Unity Village. Ruth Mosley was a very quiet, soft-spoken, but strong woman. She began with 8 students, and they studied with her in Detroit. Ruth Mosley had been a woman who was from Mississippi, had been told at the end of 8th grade that she didn't have what it took to go on to high school. And so she began working in people's homes. She later had the opportunity to go to Detroit and become a cook in someone's home. She studied, got her GED, went on, finished college, went to Unity Village, studied and became ordained as a Unity minister, and established Unity Urban Ministerial School, which has graduated and ordained more than 200 Unity ministers. She started with 8. There was a time during the recession in the early part of this 21st century, when we were having a recession and she was down to 1 student. That was 2008. She said to me, and I was someone who was simply working at Unity Village in silent unity, praying with 80 to 100 people on the phone each day and had been doing that for some 10 years. She said to me, what could you do for the urban school? Because it was about to close its doors. And I said, well, I've been trained to teach online. I could teach online. And she said, could you teach the other instructors to teach online? I said, oh, yeah, I could do that. And so I had a friend I knew who worked in the government and was not about to retire yet, who would love to go online and not have to leave home, move in order to go to ministerial school. So then we had one student, and she found one of her graduates who had a church right outside Detroit. So we had two students online, and we began 2008. When Ruth retired, about 5 years later, I became the executive director of the Unity Urban Ministerial School. I think we were up to about 65 students at that time. Today, we have students, we have probably 65 just in Africa. We have a number of students all over the planet online. The Ministerial School at Unity Village closed its doors to only full-time students and now is only online. Both are the two ministerial schools for Unity at this time. Does that answer your question, Jesse?
Wow, it does, but it brings up some more. Okay. A question of background. You mentioned there were two Caucasian ministers who really helped the Unity Urban Ministerial School. And I want to venture a guess that those were Eric Butterworth and Jack Boland. Is that, no?
Eric Butterworth was my introduction to Unity in New York. Jack Boland, those were two significant ministers. No, and of course, all this happened long before my time. No, these were two members of the board who said, Ruth, don't you bring this up at the meeting. Let me bring it up. That's how they slid it through. No, it was
okay.
Two others.
Because we have an article about Eric Butterworth from Unity Magazine where he had been approached when he was, and I did not know he was a minister in Detroit. I knew him as you did in New York City. And then he retired out of the pulpit in New York City. And that was when I had a correspondence with him at the start of my ministry, trying to get him to come speak at my church. And he said, well, when I go to a city where there's a Unity church, I have to speak there. So I'm very sorry. But we had a nice back and forth. But I didn't know until I did some research that he had ministered in Detroit. And apparently, according to what I read, a woman wrote him a letter. Yeah, you know where this is going. And offended at the fact that there were African Americans in their church. And he, the next day or so, issued a response. And that, according to this piece I read, helped get things moving and get wheels turning in the Unity hierarchy. The other question that I have is, today, if there is a Unity church with an open pulpit and it's seeking a ministerial candidate, may it go to either of the two ministerial schools graduates? Are they equally credentialed in the eyes of Unity?
Great question, Jesse. The answer, of course, is yes. However, I can remember, 20 years ago, when the answer was not yes. Okay? 20 years ago, you would have certainly called Unity Urban Ministerial School the Black Ministerial School. you would certainly have heard people think it was less than because it was Black. Today, Unity Urban Ministerial School is 10% Black. Today, there will be more people graduating the end of this year from Unity Urban Ministerial School than from the Institute at Unity Village. They are certainly considered equal, and I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you. My background in CSL was in ministerial training, was in Los Angeles, pre-internet. So I commuted some and submitted papers by fax and mail and so on to go through there. My class, which was 1986, I actually got given a novitiate license in 85 because I had started a group that grew into a church. But my class graduated in May of 86, and our class was 25% African American. And it was, I think there were 21 or 22 of us in that class. I offer that not to make Unity look bad. And that was a concern that I had, quite frankly, in this conversation, is that I thought maybe a Unity person should be speaking with you so that it stays sort of in the family, because what I never want to do is put pit one group against the other in terms of how well we've done. And as I've told you, our hands are not clean. In the past, housing was never an issue because we never had any. You know, we didn't have, CSL has never had a village. It's never had a campus like that. It's basically been attached to churches. My campus was at Founders, and we had a small headquarters building next door. And then in Seattle and San Diego and other venues where the students, they live where they live, and commute or telecommute, as the case may be now. But when you say 20 years ago, the two schools were not regarded equally, so we're talking into the 2000s.
Yes, we're talking into the 2000s. One of my associates, I think, is on listening, who graduated from, who was ordained more than 25 years ago, who could probably tell you how in the beginning, the students from the urban school in Detroit were considered about to hurt the chances of getting ordination, and so they had to spend their last year at Unity Village in order to make sure that they came up to stuff. But today, you will find more students choosing to go, and I say Caucasian students, to go to Unity Urban Ministerial School because they feel they get the education that they prefer. It's not like that today. They don't have to end up their last year at Unity Village. However, I must say that in recent years, the two schools are coming together in inclusivity, in having a joint graduation, in having students take classes from both schools, in having what we call practicing inclusivity. Much more. This is in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
All across the United States, we're growing in inclusivity, not just in New Thought.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for believing that. I would like to believe that with you in today's climate. I live in Texas.
I understand.
Thank you for that. When a student graduates from Unity Urban Ministerial School, generally, where do they typically go? It's got urban in the name. Do they typically go into existing pulpits? You mentioned you got many students in Africa, and so I assume in Africa they're creating works that had not existed.
We were just fortunate in that one of the board members, I believe, reached out to one of the students who had come from South Africa. Well, there were several. There were several from Africa. One from South Africa who had come to Unity Village and had been ordained and has a ministry there. She sent a number. There was also some ties in Nigeria from way back in the days of Charles Fillmore. And so there are a number there, and other countries where English is the spoken language, has to be that. I've taught a number of African students in my classes from various countries. To answer your question of where do they go, I am so proud to say today that the executive director of Unity Worldwide Ministries, the Association of Unity Churches, is a graduate from the Unity Urban Ministerial School. Highest position you can have in the Unity movement. So to answer your questions, they go everywhere today.
Marvelous.
That was not true in the beginning
Yeah.
of the Unity Urban Ministerial School.
No, and I learned that. Well, the Butterworth article and Unity of Lansing has a lot of material on their website, but principally I learned it, or most viscerally, I guess I'll say, I learned it from PJ Gunter, who in a class she took at Creative Life 2 or 3 years ago brought up that when she got into New Thought, in most cities there were 2 Unity churches, a white one and a black one. And we were shocked. I was shocked to know that, and to see where we've come, to see where Unity has come, and to see where New Thought has come is gratifying. But I know there's a lot of work left to be done, which is why we have these soul sessions and these conversations, and within CSL at Diversity and Inclusion Council and the resources that they create, and within Unity Village and Unity Urban Ministerial School the same. So yes, go ahead, please.
Did you know why there's a First Baptist and a Second Baptist church in cities?
For that reason?
First Baptist in any city, people knew years ago, was white. And Second Baptist in any city, people knew years ago, was black.
I did not know that.
I didn't know it until someone pointed it out, because my background is not Baptist, but
yeah,
that was true.
That's
way back.
I assumed it was just the Second Baptist Church, because you'll see this with Christian Science, because they used to be great big. And so you'll see in a city, there's a first and a ninth and a 13th and so on Church of Christ Scientists, and 2 through 8 and 10 through 12 have gone away. But these, you see what I'm saying? So the consecutively numbered churches just meant, the order they went up in. I'm shocked to hear that. I did not know that. There's so much to learn about the racist encoding in society that someone like me has not seen, has not known of, and it's right before my eyes.
It's not only a New Thought. It's been, what Martin Luther King said, the most segregated hour in the week is 11 o'clock Sunday morning. Church is when we stop diversity. That's when we separate in order to worship Spirit.
I believe Dr. Tracy Brown is watching tonight. She indicated interest on our Facebook page, and she was a guest of ours on one of these soul sessions a couple of months back. And she's written a book about this. She's written several books about that and about making intentional strides in diversity and inclusion to where everyone is not just welcome, but cherished, really, in their sacred space. It happens outside of New Thought, but it should never happen in New Thought.
That's why today, when I'm in conversations with a number of people, African American people, they know enough about unity and New Thought to find that this history that we have in New Thought of segregation is just incredible to people who know about unity. How can it be in New Thought that we have this history? We have it, it's in our society of this country and many, many other countries.
We had two religious science organizations from 1954 until about, 12 years ago, and I had trouble discussing this in class with people, newcomers to the churches. We believe in oneness and everybody's all one in this. And then in 54, we split. It was not along racial lines. It was more of an administrative thing about the educating of ministers. One group, as I understand it, this is before I was born, but one group wanted to centralize kind of the model that Unity had or proposed to have, a central campus to which all students came who wanted to go into ministry, and another group wanted more of an apprenticeship program at the larger churches. And that plus follow the money and so on led to this split that occurred. But it was a huge embarrassment to share this with people, but we had to because it was our history. And I can only imagine the embarrassment within Unity of discussing how it was in the past and how it wasn't addressed for a very long time. And then finally, I see an apology was issued by Unity Village leadership at some point in the 90s, I think.
This diversity of differences with the other are in race. They are in many areas. We see someone unlike me as the other. They occur in New Thought. They occur all throughout our society. And what we need to do is allow for these diverse views, diverse situations, diverse traits, but include all of it, and yet let it be diverse. We don't need cookie cutter. We need to embrace the diversity and yet include others and love self and love other as we love self.
Nothing about diversity should be frightening. It should be engaging and welcoming, and to find someone who is at least appears to be different from you is exciting and interesting and broadening and so on. I don't understand the rationale. I've read the history. I've read about Missouri, for instance, as a slave state and so on, and the reticence that the Fillmores may have had. And I understand there are no Fillmores in leadership in the organization anymore. Was Connie the last one?
Yes.
Okay.
She was the last one, and she headed the movement when I began working at Unity Village. Speaking of Missouri, none of our hands are clean. My ancestors are from Missouri, so I moved back here in order to work at Unity Village. But my ancestors here in Louisiana, Missouri, near the Illinois line, were both slave owners, Caucasian, and slaves here in Missouri. And I only go back 3 generations. My grandmother was born of her slave owner and her mother, who was a slave. She was a child when slavery ended. And that sounds so recent.
It is recent.
She passed away when my father was born. I don't have to go back very many generations, partly because I'm an octogenarian, and my father was 48 when I was born, so he was born in the 1890s. So, boom, I'm back to her being born in probably 1830s. We none of us have clean hands. We're all so very one. We're responsible for this, and we can eradicate it through consciousness.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Have you seen on YouTube the recording of slaves' voices telling their stories? It was recorded onto vinyl or onto the cylinder things they used in the late 1930s.
Wire recorders?
Yeah, something like field recorders. Like they used to, what's his name? Alan Lomax used to collect songs in villages in the South and in Appalachia. And there's a presentation. It's got a collage of photos with it, but there's a presentation of recording of actual slaves in their 80s and 90s in the 1940s, describing slavery, describing a firsthand experience of slavery. We shared this at our center recently and put it up during a Sunday talk on the Facebook thing, and it's my God, it's riveting.
If I were to look for it, what would I look for on
I'll
YouTube?
send you the link. You won't have to dig for it. I'll send you the link. I have it.
Thank you.
And they're so matter of fact. They're such strong people. Of course, they're very old when they're speaking, but they're so matter of fact about it, and so grounded within themselves. I think there are 5 individuals that speak, so confident of who they are and forgiving and not bitter. Yet bitterness doesn't come out. And I don't know. I'm thinking, were that me? But I guess you don't live to be in your 80s and 90s if you carry hate within you, if you carry vengeance within you. I suppose that's how that works. I want to acknowledge Sheila. Is this Reverend Sheila who's on screen with us tonight?
Sheila Jones from Chicago.
From Chicago. Wonderful. thank you so much for being here. And I see we have a couple of others who are, I don't see faces, I just see numbers and
Sheila's one
titles.
of my recent students.
Let me ask you, I know you weren't planning to speak tonight, but if you're a ministerial student, if you're going to be a minister, okay, I know that you're sitting there just waiting to jump in at some point. And I want to honor that and ask you, is there anything you'd like to add to the conversation?
I'm happy to be on this earth at this time, because just a few years ago, I might not be allowed to be enrolled in a ministerial school. I might not even be allowed to speak on this platform as a woman, as a Black woman. And so I'm grateful for the evolving of not, especially for the New Thought movement. And I thank Dr. Catherine for being one of my lovely instructors, so patient and so well-versed in every class, and giving me and my classmates the opportunity to grow and oh, I see another instructor. From our meditation class. Hi, Julian. And it's been just a pleasure to sit under these professors that have so much to offer, and I'm so excited about the class that I have, the classes that I have been in, and the ones that I'm looking forward to. We've had classes, classmates from as far as Belize and California and Toronto, Canada. And the opportunities are just endless with this new technology.
I know, isn't it great? Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit.
You are so welcome. And it's a joy to meet you. And congratulations on your forthcoming ministry and the studies that you're so enjoying right now. Let me ask you, did you come to this through Johnny Coleman's work at Christ Temple Universal?
Yes, Christ Universal Temple is my home church.
Uh-huh.
And I did take classes in the Johnny Coleman Institute, which is part of UFEL. And now I'm enrolled in the Transformative Talk College of Spiritual Studies with one of the staff ministers from Christ Universal Temple, Reverend Henrietta Bird.
Marvelous. Marvelous.
Sheila spent 40 years with Johnny Coleman.
Wow. Wow. What a life-changing experience that must have been. I spent about an hour with Dr. Johnny Coleman. When I heard her speak, I never met her. I couldn't get to her. This was at an INTA event and she spoke.
Oh.
And but I did know Dr. Barbara King
Yes.
in Atlanta, and she spoke at our center about 25 or 30 years ago. When she was in Houston, when Howard Caesar was still at Unity here, wasn't that long, he hasn't retired that long ago, but anyhow, she was in town for an event with INTA, and she came to our church, and we were still very small, and spoke to us. And I never forgot her, and we stayed somewhat in touch, and I was very sorry to hear of her passing. It was last year.
Well, the INTA will be in Chicago this year.
I don't hear much about them anymore, the INTA, since the rise of AGNT, and I need to keep track of both organizations. So, so it goes. Let me ask, and welcome, Julian. Is it Reverend Julian? It's nice to meet you. I'm Jesse Jennings. So nice to have you here. Let me ask about, Dr. Catherine had brought it back to Missouri. I want to take it back to Detroit for a minute. About Mother Waddles, Charlesetta Waddles. I brought her up in teaching a course on New Thought history. And I think it came across wrong. What I was trying to say, the point I was trying to make by introducing her, because she had this powerful ministry to the poor. They have collected to date over 100,000 used automobiles, which can be rebuilt, worked on, or broken up and sold for parts as students' needs dictate. And I was reminded by one of the students in the class, she said, African-American people are for the most part not poor, are for the most part middle class economically. And I replied, I know that, without sounding like a white man saying he knows that. But the point that I was trying to get to, and I did get to it, and we had a wonderful conversation in the class about it, was everything I've ever read in New Thought about prosperity seems to aim at a certain income level and above. It's about, you have a home, you want a nicer home. You want a vacation home. You have a car, you want a Mercedes Benz or something. Yeah, everything is about improving from a position of, say, at least adequacy into luxury. And I see nothing in our prosperity teachings aimed at the people who work 3 jobs, at the people for whom a prosperity demonstration is 4 good tires on their car that they use to get there. What are your thoughts on this? Is there some languaging of prosperity teachings in New Thought that I'm not aware of that address this, that speak to the people who are maybe newly in the country, newly in the workforce, newly out of incarceration, just getting their feet under them in moving forward?
Jesse, were you addressing this to me?
Yes, I believe I was. I welcome input from Julian and Sheila too, but principally you're this is our conversation, so please.
First of all, very few people on earth know that if African Americans were a country on this planet, it would be the 6th largest in prosperity, in wealth. African Americans have money, but they are in a society, we are in a society where that money simply flows through the hands of African Americans from a white community to a white community. It doesn't stick here. It doesn't even come generation to generation here. It just flows through. I don't think most people, Black or white, I don't think most African Americans are aware of that. But what you're saying is, and Johnny Coleman did it beautifully, she taught prosperity like nobody's business to African Americans. She was the prosperity teacher. I'm going to ask Julian to speak to this particular subject. This is Reverend Dr. Julian Tellis-Ford, graduate from Unity Urban Ministerial School some 25 or more years ago. Julian, speak to this.
Speak to what? What again? Say it again.
Speak to this issue of a new thought, prosperity consciousness for African Americans.
Well, yes, thank you, Reverend Dr. Catherine Thomas. And for the record, I'm a graduate from Unity Urban Ministerial School. That's Reverend Mosley. I knew her personally. Can you anybody see that picture, Reverend
Yes.
Mosley? Right.
Thank you.
And we started in a little house in Detroit, Inglewood and something, a little. And then they arranged for us when we graduated to go to the, as Catherine mentioned, to the finishing week. 3 weeks in Detroit and 1 week in the Unity Village. We didn't have much. By the time I got in, excuse me, by the time I got in there, some of the kinks in the social setup, the kinks in regards to the color business, black and white, were kind of smoothed out a bit. They were still there, but they were smooth. They were not, the peaks and the valleys were not that prominent. So I graduated there, from there, and I lived on the grounds. The building was not that friendly during the winter. Wind was coming in, the cold air was coming, all that, but it was on the grounds. It was convenient in other ways. And we had some broad-minded instructors that weren't trying to find a reason to get you out because you're black. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna let you in, but slightest step, you better walk me on the straight line. And they shift the boundary lines and move the poles and stuff like that, change the rules overnight, or not. You don't know the rules have been changed, but people have ways of doing this kind of thing. Well, some of that came in when I applied for to be in the prayer ministry. They said, well, the people wouldn't understand. They'll have problems understanding your prayer because you have an accent. So I told my friend Catherine, who introduced me, who welcomed me to the village and helped me out, helped me negotiate and so on. Although we came down with six of us came down from Detroit, so we had a group that had some power behind us. So I thought that was funny. So I stood up on that. I argued and said, well, everybody has an accent. I didn't just, at the time I went there, I knew I had an accent, but I didn't, I know I could, my vocabulary was probably better than most of the ones that were talking about accents. I could stand on my ground. So I didn't take that down. I didn't take that lightly, and I complained to a few people about it, and they gave me another interviewer. And that person didn't find any problems with hiring me. My accent wasn't a problem. But of course, whenever I prayed, some people say, "Where are you from?" I had to deal with that like a hurdle, it was invisible. And then, let's say I sung the barrier. And I would say, we're not in the prayer ministry, you have to keep your ego out of the prayer, out of the relationship with the caller, the supplicant, and so you can come across as, oh, I don't know, I'm been praying for all these years of time, you know. I know how God works. No, you have to leave that out. They want us where from us. We can't. We're not allowed to discuss our. You know, I'm here. We are here to hold you in prayer. So when they ask, like, if we are here to hold you in prayer, well, you can tell me. Some people, you know, the persistent kind of people, that they feel they have a point, they have the hook in there, and they want to reel you in. So, but I didn't go for that at all. And then the prayer monitors will be listening on the other end. Sometimes they themselves will call and pretend they just to see if they could get you if you following the rules. Sometimes they're listening. But
This is funny. Yeah, this call may be recorded.
yeah.
Quality assurance.
For
Yeah.
quality purposes. Anyway, so I got through that, and I was happy. I was a happy camper. So I spent 18 years in the prayer ministry.
Man, I hate to cut you off, but
Yeah, go
Reverend
ahead.
Lisa's waving her hand that we're
Right.
coming to questions. Let me just say this. It's a delight to meet you, a delight to speak with you. And if you call our world ministry of prayer, they're like, we don't want to hear your story. What do you want? They get right to the point. What do you want? So I know Reverend Catherine has 3 things she wants to share on screen. And we also want to talk about, is that her? What book is that? Is that your book or her book?
That was my book, man.
That's-
Ernest Holmes' New Thought Dictionary.
Oh, excellent. May I
I-
recommend the Essential Ernest Holmes? It's wonderful too. You'll
This
love
is
it.
very-
Okay,
this is
Lisa.
Very good.
Lisa, what do you got for us? You're muted. You're muted.
We can,
Sorry, I was trying to give you one, it's a 5-minute warning, which is now a 3-minute warning.
All right.
And 2, there's been a lot of chat, but not really questions, but I want to give you this one comment from David Alexander.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think context is everything. Johnny Coleman and Reverend Ike were using New Thought principles as a kind of liberation theology, but in the hands of white leaders, it has been a class affluent gospel.
Thank you, David. Absolutely. And that was what I was trying to say. It was not only Black students, it's the poor. And the poor in America, the largest group of poor in America are Latinx. And it's not the only group of poor, but it's the largest demographic. And we've got to find a way to speak to people who are living from paycheck to paycheck and still not making it work. Where lofty goals and things are just pipe dreams to them at that point, at that level of financial insecurity. Reverend Catherine, Dr. Catherine, you wanted me to share screen.
yes.
Shall I do that now?
Yes. Next week, not next week, next time in 2 weeks, we will be discussing the book by Sharif Abdullah called Practicing the 12 Steps of Inclusivity. We're moving from diversity to inclusivity, and we will be going through at least one of these 12 steps in our discussion in 2 weeks on May 18th. I'm complete. Unless there's some other question. Jesse?
Let me just get back to Lisa for a second. Is there anything else in the comments that anybody else wants to ask or comment on?
Prosperity thing.
Prosperity theme. Yeah, it's we can pick that up, you know, if you like, we can pick that up when we meet again in 2 weeks. It's not a question directed specifically at you, Dr. Catherine, or the Unity family. It's a question that I have, that I'm wrestling with, that I'm working on, that I'm writing about, and so on, about how to include everyone in the picture. And I absolutely hear what you're saying about money flowing through the Black community from white capital to white banking to white real estate.
We'll talk some more about that next time.
Please. And I know that PJ Gunter has a great deal of information on that as well from her work in economics. And we had talked about Reverend Sheila Gautreaux joining us next time. Also, we'll speak more about that afterward. Sheila, have you something for us?
Just quickly, I wanted to mention that Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman was wise enough to see some of what you're talking about, and she endorsed one of our congregants that wanted to begin a ministry for women that had transitioned from prison. And we also, she has, I guess it's called a safe house, that she has really had some wonderful, exciting results from. And also we have a prison ministry that has been established with endorsement from our current senior minister.
Marvelous. That is wonderful to hear. Let me put a name out to you, Bishop Mioke Shonin, who's a practitioner at Creative Life, but she's a Buddhist bishop, Bishop of North America in the Nichiren tradition. And her Sangha has a prison outreach in Navasota, Texas, where they lead Buddhist meditations. And she is a woman of color. She's biracial, and you can see her interviewed on our YouTube channel in the playlist of Soul Sessions. She is a delight. She's probably watching us tonight too, I would think. Dr. Catherine and friends, thank you so much for being with us tonight. This has meant the world, and I know it has to those watching, and it will live forever in cyberspace where others will see it and grow from it as well. And I look forward to our getting together again in 2 weeks. Again, for everybody, that's May the 18th, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. Another hour with Dr. Catherine Thomas and friends and me. So bidding you so long tonight from Creative Life Spiritual Center in suburban Houston, Texas. Much love to all. Thank you. Good night.